Devin Carter sat on the edge of his bed, lacing up his worn-out sneakers. Outside, the morning sun cut through the thin curtains of his grandmother's apartment, casting long shadows across the faded rug. The place smelled like cinnamon and old books, comforting, familiar. At 14, Devin had learned to find peace in small things. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a train whistle, the way dust floated in the light like tiny stars. He wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. At school he kept his head down, answered when called on, and never caused trouble. Teachers liked that about him, except for one. Ms. Holloway taught music at East Ridge Middle. She wore pearl earrings every day and spoke like she'd swallowed a dictionary. Most kids thought she was strict but fair. Devin wasn't so sure. There was something in the way she looked at him, like he was a puzzle she didn't want to solve. That week, she'd announced a cultural showcase for music class. Everyone had to present something that reflected their background, a song, a dance, a story. Most kids groaned. Devin stayed quiet. He didn't talk about his home life much. Didn't mention the piano in the corner of his living room, its keys yellowed with age, or how he'd taught himself to play by watching videos late at night with the volume turned low so his grandma could sleep. His grandfather had left the piano behind when he passed. Devin remembered sitting on his lap as a little kid, tiny fingers pressing random keys while his grandpa chuckled and showed him how to find middle C. "Music ain't just noise, boy," he'd said. "It's truth with rhythm." Now, years later, that truth lived in Devin's hands. On Thursday, Ms. Holloway stood at the front of the classroom, clipboard in hand. "All right, let's see who's ready," she said, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on Devin, a pause, then a small, tight smile. "Devin," she said, voice smooth as glass, "you're always tapping your pencil like you've got a beat in your head. And I've heard you humming in the hallway those little street melodies. Maybe you'd like to share something authentic with us." A few kids snickered. One whispered, "He gonna freestyle?" Another mimed playing air drums. Devin felt his face grow warm. He hadn't been humming anything special, just a tune he'd been working out in his head. But the way she said authentic, like it was a joke, made his stomach twist. He could have said no. Could have mumbled an excuse, but something in him refused to shrink. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "I'll play piano." Ms. Holloway blinked, surprised. "Oh, you play?" "Yes." "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "that's unexpected. Very well. You're on for Monday." The class moved on, but Devin stayed still, heart pounding. Not from fear, from focus. He knew what she'd meant. She'd expected him to stumble, to embarrass himself with some clumsy performance. She'd set him up to be laughed at, not celebrated. But Devin had a secret. He wasn't just good. He was better than most people twice his age. That afternoon he walked the 6 blocks home, backpack slung over one shoulder. His grandma was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of collard greens. She glanced up and smiled. "How was school, baby?" "Fine," he said, dropping his bag by the door. She studied him. "You got that look again?" "What look?" "The one that says you're carrying something heavy." He almost told her. Almost said, "Ms. Holloway tried to make me the class clown." But he didn't want to worry her. She worked double shifts at the clinic and still made sure he had clean clothes and hot meals. He wouldn't add to her load. Instead, he went to the living room and sat at the piano. He lifted the fallboard. The keys were chipped in places, but they still sang when he touched them. He placed his fingers on the middle C, just like his grandpa taught him, and closed his eyes. What came out wasn't a song he'd copied. It was something new. A slow, rolling melody that started soft like rain on a roof, then built into something stronger, full of longing, pride, and quiet fire. His left hand laid down a deep, steady rhythm while his right wove notes like threads of gold. He didn't think about the showcase. Didn't think about Ms. Holloway's smirk. He just played what was in him. His grandma stood in the doorway, unnoticed. She didn't say a word, just listened, arms crossed, eyes glistening. When he finished, the room felt different, like the air had changed. "You gonna play that Monday?" she asked softly. He nodded. "You show them who you are," she said. "Not what they think you are." Sunday night, Devin practiced until his fingers ached. He polished the piece until every note had purpose. He didn't want to impress. He wanted to speak. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly. At school, kids buzzed about the showcase. One girl sang a folk song from her grandmother's village. Two boys did a step routine they'd learned from their uncles. Each performance was met with claps and smiles. Then Ms. Holloway called Devon's name. He walked to the front slowly, heart steady now. The school piano was nothing like his, out of tune, sticky keys, but it would do. Ms. Holloway gave her introduction, voice dripping with false sweetness. "Let's see what our young man brings from his world." Devon ignored her, sat down, took a breath and played. The first notes hung in the air like a question. Then the melody unfolded, rich, complex, alive. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It carried stories of late nights, of loss, of love that never left. Of a boy who found his voice in silence. Halfway through, Ms. Holloway's pen stopped moving. Her lips parted slightly. She stared at him like she'd never really seen him before. The room was dead quiet. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. When the last note faded, no one moved for a full 3 seconds. Then, applause. Not polite clapping. Real, surprised, moved applause. Kids leaned forward in their seats. One girl wiped her eyes. Devon stood, nodded, and walked back to his seat. No smile, no bow, just quiet dignity. Ms. Holloway cleared her throat. Well, that was unexpected, but her voice lacked its usual edge. For the first time, she sounded unsure. After class, a boy Devon barely knew clapped him on the shoulder. "Dude, where'd you learn to play like that?" "Just practiced," Devon said. At home that evening, he sat at his piano again, not to rehearse, just to be with the music. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, peace settled over him like a blanket. He hadn't played to prove anything. He'd played because it was true, and sometimes truth is louder than any insult. The bell hadn't even rung yet, but the hallway outside the music room was already buzzing. Kids leaned against lockers, whispering, glancing toward the door like something big was about to happen. It wasn't every day someone shut Ms. Holloway up with just a piano. Devon walked in last, head down, backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't want the attention, but the moment he stepped inside, the chatter dipped. A few kids gave him nods. One girl mouthed, "You killed it." He just nodded back and slid into his usual seat near the window. Ms. Holloway stood at the front, straight-backed as ever, but something was off. Her usual crisp energy was gone. She avoided looking at him while shuffling papers, her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the desk. When the bell finally rang, she cleared her throat like she was trying to find her voice again. "All right," she said, voice tighter than usual. "Let's continue with the cultural showcase." The rest of the presentations felt smaller after what Devon had done. A boy recited a poem his abuela used to tell him. Another played a simple folk tune on a recorder. They were sweet, honest, but everyone kept glancing at Devon like they were measuring their own work against his quiet storm. He didn't mean to overshadow anyone. He just hoped they'd forget about him soon. But that wasn't happening. At lunch, two older kids from the jazz club stopped by his table. "Hey," one said, sliding into the seat across from him. "We heard you played Monday. You ever think about joining the ensemble?" Devon shrugged. "I don't read sheet music that well." "Man, you don't need to," the other said. "What you played, that was feeling. That's what matters." He didn't say yes, didn't say no, just thanked them and went back to his sandwich. But word traveled faster than he expected. By Wednesday, someone had posted a shaky phone video of his performance in the school group chat. It wasn't high quality. The mic picked up more hallway noise than piano, but you could still hear the heart in it. Within hours, it jumped to the neighborhood community page. Then a local arts blog shared it with the caption, "When talent speaks louder than prejudice." Devon didn't know about any of it until his grandma called him into the living room that evening. "Baby," she said, holding up her tablet. "You're on the internet," he groaned. "Please tell me it's not bad," she smiled. "It's beautiful. People are saying you've got a gift." He watched the video, cringed at first, then listened. Hearing himself play from the outside was strange. It sounded full, like someone else had poured everything they felt into those notes. Maybe that's what music was, a way to say things you couldn't put into words. Still, he didn't like the comments calling Ms. Holloway racist or evil. He knew what she'd done was wrong, but he didn't want her destroyed. He just wanted to be seen for who he really was, not a stereotype, not a punchline, not a symbol. Just Devon. Friday morning, the principal's assistant called him out of math class. Mr. Langley's office was neat. Wood desk, framed photos of his kids. A potted plant that looked like it hadn't been watered in weeks. The principal himself stood when Devin walked in. "Devin," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Have a seat." Devin sat, hands in his lap. "I wanted to talk to you about your performance," Mr. Langley began, folding his hands. "It was remarkable. Truly. Thank you, sir. There's been some discussion among the staff, and a few messages from parents," he paused. "Some are concerned about how the assignment was framed, about whether certain students were singled out." Devin stayed quiet. "I'm not asking you to name names," Mr. Langley added quickly, "but I want you to know if anything made you uncomfortable, if you felt disrespected, you can tell me. This school is supposed to be a place where everyone belongs." Devin looked down at his shoes. "I just wanted to play," he said softly. "I didn't ask to be put on the spot, but I'm glad I did it." Mr. Langley nodded slowly. "You handled yourself with more grace than most adults would have. I'm proud of you." Back in class, Ms. Holloway didn't mention the video, didn't mention the buzz, but during warm-ups she assigned a new piece, something classical, complex. And when she passed Devin's desk, she paused. "You've got real skill," she said so low only he could hear. "Don't waste it." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a jab either. Maybe it was as close as she could get right now. That weekend, Devin got a message from a number he didn't recognize. He almost deleted it. Spam probably, but something made him open it. "Saw your video. Name's Ray Ellison. I play jazz downtown. If you're serious about music, I'd love to hear you in person. No pressure. Just coffee and keys." Devin stared at the screen. Ray Ellison. He'd heard the name before. Played at the Blue Note Lounge, taught workshops, even recorded a few albums. Why would someone like that reach out to him? He showed the message to his grandma. She read it twice, then looked at him. "You scared?" "A little." "Good," she said. "Means you care." He texted back, "Okay, when?" They met Sunday afternoon at a small cafe near the train station. Mr. Ellison was older, gray at the temples, hands rough from decades of playing, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He wore a worn leather jacket and smelled like coffee and wood polish. "You're smaller than I pictured," he said, smiling. "And you're taller," Devin replied. They laughed. The tension broke. Mr. Ellison led him to a back room where an old baby grand sat under soft light. "Play me something," he said. "Anything," Devin hesitated, then sat. He played the same piece from the showcase, but this time freer, looser, like he was talking to a friend instead of defending himself. When he finished, Mr. Ellison was quiet for a long moment. "You ever heard of Mary Lou Williams?" he asked. Devin shook his head. "Or Oscar Peterson? Errol Garner?" "No, sir." Mr. Ellison leaned forward. "Then you've got a whole world waiting for you. Black folks didn't just sing spirituals or play hip-hop beats, son. We built jazz. We shaped classical. We wrote symphonies while people said we couldn't read music." He pulled out a notebook and scribbled a list. "Start here, listen, learn, and come back next week. I'll show you how to turn that feeling into fire." Devin walked home that evening with the list in his pocket and a new kind of quiet in his chest. Not the kind that came from hiding, but from knowing he wasn't alone. At home, he sat at his piano again, not to practice for anyone, not to prove a point, just to play. And for the first time in a long time, the music didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a beginning. The next few weeks moved like a slow river, steady, quiet, but full of hidden currents. Devin kept going to school, kept turning in his homework, kept nodding when teachers called his name. But something had shifted underneath it all. People looked at him differently now. Not just with curiosity, but with a kind of respect that felt both warm and heavy. At lunch, kids he'd never spoken to asked if he'd play at the spring talent show. The jazz club invited him to sit in during rehearsal. Even the school custodian, Mr. Ruiz, stopped him in the hallway one day and said, "My granddaughter saw that video. She started piano lessons last week. Said she wants to play like you." Devin didn't know what to say to that. He just mumbled, "Hope she likes it," and kept walking. But inside, it stuck with him. His music had reached someone he'd never even met. Then came the email. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, addressed to both him and his grandma. The school district's Office of Equity and Student Support wanted to follow up regarding recent classroom dynamics. They asked if Devin would be willing to share his experience in a confidential conversation His grandma read it twice over coffee. "You don't have to," she said, watching him stir sugar into his oatmeal. "But if you do, you speak your truth, not to hurt anyone, but to help make sure it doesn't happen again." He thought about it all day. That night, sitting at the piano, he realized he wasn't angry anymore. He was tired of being small. So he typed back, "Yes, I'll talk." The meeting happened in a small room at the district office. No cameras, no crowd, just a woman with kind eyes and a notebook, and Devin sitting across from her with his hands folded. He didn't shout. Didn't accuse. He just told it like it was. "She didn't yell or call me names," he said. But the way she said authentic, like it was something less, like I was supposed to be a joke, not a student. "I played because I love music. Not to prove I belong, but because I already do." The woman nodded, writing slowly. "Thank you, Devin. That takes courage." A week later, Ms. Holloway was placed on temporary leave. The school didn't say why publicly, just that she was participating in professional development. Some kids whispered it was because of Devin. Others said it was overblown. But the truth was quieter than all of it. Someone had finally listened. Meanwhile, Devin started his lessons with Mr. Ellison every Sunday afternoon. The old musician didn't just teach scales or chords. He told stories. About how Duke Ellington wrote symphonies in hotel rooms between gigs. How Nina Simone turned pain into protest songs that still shook the world. How black composers were written out of textbooks, their names erased like they never mattered. "Music ain't just notes," Mr. Ellison said one afternoon, tapping the piano lid. "It's memory. It's resistance. It's joy that refuses to be silenced." Devin soaked it in. He started listening to old recordings. Thelonious Monk's wild rhythms, Billie Holiday's aching voice, Florence Price's lush symphonies. He'd never known so many voices had paved the way for his own. One evening after dinner, his grandma found him scribbling in a notebook. "What's that?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "A new piece," he said. "I'm calling it Still Here." She sat beside him. "Why that name?" "Because," he said, looking up, "no matter what they think, no matter how they try to box you in, you're still here, playing, breathing, creating." She kissed the top of his head. "Then it's already a masterpiece." School got harder in ways he didn't expect. Some kids treated him like a hero. Others acted like he'd betrayed them by making a scene. One boy in gym class muttered, "Must be nice to get special treatment just 'cause you can tickle the ivories." Devin didn't respond. He just kept walking. But that night he played Still Here for the first time all the way through. Fast, fierce, full of questions and answers tangled together. When he finished, his hands were shaking. Mr. Ellison heard it the next Sunday. He didn't clap. Just leaned back in his chair and said, "Now that's got teeth and heart." "You think it's ready?" Devin asked. "For what?" "For people to hear it. Not just in a classroom. Somewhere real." Mr. Ellison smiled. "There's a community center downtown hosting a youth arts night next month. Local musicians, poets, painters. I know the organizer. Want me to put your name in?" Devin hesitated. This wasn't about proving anything to Ms. Holloway anymore. This was about sharing something true. "Yeah," he said. "I do." The days that followed were a blur of practice and doubt. He tweaked the melody, added a new bridge, slowed the ending so it lingered like a sigh. His grandma made him grilled cheese sandwiches while he played, humming along even when she got the notes wrong. One rainy afternoon as he practiced, his phone buzzed. It was a message from a local radio station. "We heard about your piece Still Here. Would you consider performing it live on our Youth Spotlight segment?" He stared at the screen, then showed his grandma. She didn't cheer, didn't cry. She just put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You ready?" "I think so." "Then say yes." He typed back, "I'd be honored." That night he didn't play for an audience or a teacher or even for himself. He played for his grandfather, who'd shown him middle C. For his grandma, who worked double shifts so he could dream. For every kid who'd ever been told their voice didn't matter. And as the rain tapped against the window, the notes rose like smoke, steady, strong, and full of life. He wasn't just playing piano anymore, he was speaking. The morning Ms. Holloway returned to school, the air felt different, like before a storm that never quite breaks. Devin saw her in the hallway before first period, standing by the faculty lounge with a paper cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked smaller somehow. Her usual crisp blazer was replaced with a soft cardigan and she didn't wear her pearls. She glanced up as he passed. For a second, their eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't nod, but she didn't look away either. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't even understanding, but it was something. Maybe the beginning of seeing him as a person, not a role she'd assigned him. Devin kept walking. He didn't need her to say sorry. He just needed her to stop pretending he wasn't real. Things at school had settled into a new rhythm. The buzz around his video had faded, replaced by the usual chatter about tests and weekend plans. But the change in him remained. He sat taller, spoke up in class when he had something to say, even joined the after-school music group where he helped arrange a jazz-funk piece for the spring concert. Mr. Ellison kept pushing him, not just with technique, but with history. "You think you're the first kid told he doesn't belong on that bench?" he'd say, pointing to the piano. "Nah, but you're the one playing now. So play like you mean it." Devin did. He finished Still Here that week, added a final chord that hung in the air like a promise. He practiced it every night, not to perfect it, but to live inside it. The piece wasn't angry. It was steady. Like walking through a room full of noise and keeping your own quiet pace. The community center performance was coming up fast. He'd be playing on a real grand piano, under soft lights for an audience that actually wanted to hear him. No assignments, no smirks. Just music. His grandma took the night off work. "Wouldn't miss it if the sky fell," she said, pressing his good shirt with extra care. 2 days before the show, he got another surprise. A letter arrived in the mail, not email. Real paper, folded neatly in a white envelope. It was from a summer music program at a university 2 states away. They'd seen the radio segment, heard Still Here, and wanted to offer him a full scholarship to their youth intensive. 6 weeks of master classes, ensemble work, and composition labs with working musicians. Devin read it 3 times, then sat on the edge of his bed staring at the wall. His grandma found him like that. "What's wrong?" "It's a lot," he said. She sat beside him. "You don't have to go. I know." He looked at her. "But what if I'm not ready?" She took his hand. "Baby, you've been ready since you first touched those keys. This ain't about being perfect. It's about showing up." He thought about his grandfather's old piano, the one with the sticky E-flat key and the crack in the wood. He thought about the nights he played just to keep the silence from getting too loud. He thought about Ms. Holloway's voice saying authentic like it was a joke. He wasn't playing for her anymore. Or for fame. Or even for himself alone. He was playing because the music asked him to. The night of the community center show, the room filled fast. Folding chairs lined the floor. Fairy lights strung across the ceiling. Local artists displayed paintings on easels. A poet read verses about home and hunger. A dancer moved like water under a single spotlight. Then it was Devin's turn. He walked to the piano in his dark slacks and button-down, heart calm. Mr. Ellison gave him a thumbs up from the back. His grandma sat front row, hands folded in her lap, eyes bright. He sat, placed his fingers on the keys, took a breath and played Still Here. This time the piece felt bigger, like it had grown since he first wrote it. The opening notes were gentle, almost shy. Then the rhythm built, layer by layer, like someone finding their voice after years of silence. Midway through, he added a new run, a cascade of notes that sounded like laughter and tears tangled together. The room didn't just listen. It leaned in. When he hit the final chord, it didn't end so much as fade, like a truth that lingers long after the words are gone. Silence. Then applause, not loud, but deep. The kind that comes from feeling something real. Afterward, people came up to him. An older woman with silver braids said, "My brother played like that before he passed. Thank you for bringing him back to me for a minute." A teenager asked how he learned to make the piano talk. Mr. Ellison just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You're ready for that summer program." No doubt. On the walk home, his grandma didn't say much, just held his arm like she used to when he was little and scared of the dark. "You proud?" he finally asked. She stopped under a streetlight, turned to him. "Proud don't cover it. You didn't just play a song tonight, baby. You told a story, yours, mine, ours. And you told it true," he smiled. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he had to carry everything alone. Back at the apartment, he went straight to the piano. Not to practice, not to prepare, just to play. The notes floated out the open window, mixing with the hum of the city, the distant sirens, the laughter from the corner store, the wind rustling through the trees, and somewhere in all that noise, his music found its place not as a weapon, not as proof, but as a quiet, steady voice saying, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The school's spring inclusive arts night wasn't like the old talent shows. This one felt different, warmer, like everyone had a seat at the table, not just the loudest or flashiest. Students helped plan it. Teachers listened instead of directing. Even the posters were made by kids, splashed with colors and quotes like, "Your voice matters," and "Art has no borders." Devin stood near the back of the auditorium that evening, adjusting the mic stand by the piano. He wasn't nervous, just present. He'd helped choose the lineup, made sure there were spoken word pieces, folk songs in different languages, even a short film made by a shy girl from his math class. This wasn't about one performance. It was about making space. Miss Holloway was there too. She sat in the third row alone, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at him when he passed, but she stayed for the whole thing. That was enough. The night unfolded like a slow bloom. A boy played a traditional drum passed down from his grandfather in Senegal. Two girls sang a bilingual duet, one verse in English, one in Tagalog. A non-binary student read a poem about finding home in their own skin. Each act was met with snaps, quiet mm-hms, and real unforced applause. Then it was Devin's turn. He walked to the piano in a simple black shirt, no fancy jacket, no bow. Just him and the music. This time he wasn't alone. 4 classmates, 2 violinists, a cellist, and a flutist joined him on stage. They'd rehearsed Still Here together for weeks, weaving their instruments into his piano like threads in a tapestry. He nodded to them. They nodded back. He began. The piece had grown again, deeper, richer. The piano carried the heartbeat, while the strings wrapped around it like arms offering support. The flute floated above it all, light and hopeful. It wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to all of them. Halfway through, Devin glanced out and saw his grandma wiping her eyes, saw Mr. Ellison leaning against the wall, arms crossed, smiling like he'd known this would happen all along, saw Miss Holloway still as stone, but her eyes were wet. When the last note faded, the room didn't erupt. It exhaled, then rose to its feet, not because they were told to, but because something real had just happened. Afterward, the principal found him backstage. "That was more than music," he said quietly. "That was healing." Devin just nodded. He didn't have the words yet. A week later, the local radio station aired the full performance. Listeners called in, not just to praise, but to share their own stories, of being underestimated, of finding their voice late, of holding on when no one believed in them. The station host ended the segment by saying, "Sometimes, the most powerful thing a young person can do is simply show up as themselves." Not long after, Devin got the official acceptance letter for the summer music intensive. This time it didn't scare him. He showed it to his grandma over pancakes. "So?" she asked, flipping a golden brown circle onto his plate. "I'm going," he said. She didn't cry, just smiled and said, "Good. You'll bring back more than just new songs. You'll bring back more of yourself." The days before he left were quiet. He spent afternoons at Mr. Ellison's studio soaking up every tip, every story. "Don't just play what's on the page," the old musician told him. "Play what's between the lines. That's where the soul lives." On his last night home, Devin sat at his grandfather's piano one more time. The keys felt familiar under his fingers, like an old friend saying goodbye. His grandma brought him a mug of warm milk with honey, just like when he was small. "You'll be okay out there," she said, sitting beside him. "I know," he said. "Because I'm not going to prove anything. I'm just going to learn." She kissed his forehead. "That's my boy." The summer program was everything he'd hoped for, and nothing like he expected. He met kids from all over the country, each with their own sound, their own story. Some played classical. Some made beats on laptops. One girl composed using sounds from her grandmother's kitchen, sizzling oil, chopping knives, the clink of teacups. They didn't talk much about race or labels. They just played. And in that space, Devin finally understood. Music wasn't about being the best. It was about being honest. He came back in August with sun on his skin, notebooks full of new ideas and a heart that felt bigger. His first week back, he started teaching piano to his 8-year-old cousin, who'd been begging for lessons. They sat together at the old upright, Devin guiding small hands to middle C. "Now press it," he said gently. The boy did. The note rang out clear and bright. Devin smiled. That's where it all starts. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, he played a new piece, one he hadn't named yet. It wasn't about defiance or pain. It was about peace, about walking through the world with your head up, not because you've won a battle, but because you know your worth doesn't need proving. His grandma listened from the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Outside, the city hummed its usual song, cars, voices, distant laughter. And inside, the piano answered note by note like a conversation that would never really end. Because music wasn't just something Devin did. It was who he was. And that was enough.